Hi, and welcome to All Things Divorce Podcast. I'm Launi Sheldon, the host of All Things Divorce Podcast. Today we have Karen Mavrikos on with us. And a little bit about Karen. She is a licensed clinical therapist. She is currently in private practice, working with adults and children with focus on general mental health, trauma, and addiction. She helps families and individuals process and heal a variety of mental health issues, ranging from depression and anxiety to marital and family problems. She says process, but relationships. She has experience in the challenges of divorce. She too has gone through a divorce. I was her attorney. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Her children were 8 and 11 when she got divorced. My kids were 5 and 8, I think, by the time it was finished. Anyway, it was tough for everyone. She knows it. She's lived it. She's proud to say that they've grown into strong, self-assured adults in spite of their upheaval. I just heard that her son got into Northwestern Law School. I hope I'm allowed to say that.
Of course.
And we're passing pictures of our kids. So she does focus on what needs to be done to help the kids thrive and move on. And she gives the support, and she's going to talk to us today about that. She's going to talk to us today about what kids need in divorce and kind of how divorce affects kids. So this is a topic that's near and dear to her heart. A little bit also about our history. I've known Karen since the day I was born. So our parents were friends. They dropped us in the crib and playpen together. And so we've been friends for our entire lives. So, and Karen's great. I'm super excited to have her here today. Just as a reminder, listening to this podcast does not create a therapist-client relationship or an attorney-client relationship. It's for entertainment purposes only. Both Karen and I are licensed only in Arizona. However, the topics that we're going to discuss really are, they're universal topics. It's how divorce affects kids, and really how our behaviors as parents getting divorced affect the kids and kind of what they're going through. So welcome, Karen, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Launi. Good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm super excited. So Karen, we all know there's just a lot of divorces going on. The society, life is so hard right now in this world, I think, for kids. But what can people expect from their children when they're going through a divorce? What does that look like for them? What are they going to see?
Well, you can pretty much expect the gamut of challenges, emotionally, behaviorally, even physically. They're going to experience more guilt that it's their fault, guilt that they couldn't save the family, obviously anxiety because they're living in a world of unsurety. Children don't have any power, to be honest. The younger they are, the less power that they have, but that feeling of powerless is going to be amped up. You might see some behavioral issues both at home and at school. Regression, if you have younger children, they may start wetting the bed. They may refer back to baby talk or childlike behaviors from previous stages in their life. You might find them withdrawing both socially and at home. They might stay in their room a lot more. They might dive into social media. They're trying to understand this. So they might, if they're a little older, you might find them on Reddit trying to get their own answers. That's really important to know because as a parent, you want to be the person answering their questions, not random strangers on the internet. You might find that they spend more time with their friends, less time at home, trouble focusing, so problems in school, confusion. Confusion is going to be huge. Why? Why is this happening? I personally experienced this, and I know a lot of people who did. They have a lot of anger. They oftentimes at the parent who chose to initiate the divorce. A lot of these emotions are big. They're loud, they're painful to hear. So those are some of the things that you can expect. You want to be mindful of any changes in behavior that could indicate drug use. Sometimes they'll dive into their friendships And oftentimes they are gone so often that you think they're doing okay because they're with their friends, but they might be making associations that could be unhealthy. They might be getting information from their friends that may not be congruent with your values and the messages that you want to send to your kids. So those are just some of the things. I personally experienced them, and I've seen them with the children that I work with. I've seen them with the children of my friends who are also experiencing divorce.
Yeah, I think at our age, there's so many of our friends have gone through divorces, and it's sad, but it's true, and it sort of is what it is. So it's how do we make the best of it for our kids? So what age do you think, with all these different things that you're going to see with your kids, what age do you think is the most difficult for kids going through a divorce?
Well, specialists and the clinical community suggests that it's between the ages of 3 to 15, which is a pretty broad range. That's their entire childhood.
That's
7, 8, 9, those can be the harder years, especially for boys, because they're trying to figure out, how to define themselves as young men. And oftentimes, the mother may have more time with the child, so he's missing that time with his father. While those are very prime years, and they can be very hard for the child, I've noticed, and it's my belief that college years, a lot of people will say, I want to wait until the kids go to college. I actually find that to be a more disruptive time to divorce, because the way I see it is these children have a lighthouse, and that's their home, that's their foundation, that's their stability and structure. And then they go off to college, and they're looking to the lighthouse to support them through a very turbulent time in their life. It's exciting to go to college, but it's also one of the biggest transitions that they will experience. They're going into the world, and they're learning how to be adults, but they count on their parents to be that foundation. So divorcing when they're in college actually just shatters that foundation. They don't really have any home to come home to, and if they do, it's not the home that they knew. They start to question whether their entire childhood was a lie. Here they left home thinking that they had a happy home, and then they find out that it wasn't so happy, and they start doubting themselves. They doubt the safety and structure in the world. Trust issues start to form. So for a lot of people who say, I want to wait until the kids leave at home, this can be a really challenging time for their lives to do it then. And you don't have the same, I'll say, access to shape their process when they're gone. You're not
so true.
they're not
Yeah.
living in your home. You're not providing that structure from the inside out. So I find that waiting until they go to college can actually be more disruptive if you teach them how to be adaptable and be resilient while they're young, and say, okay, we have something that's unpleasant, and we need to learn how to adapt to this. It can actually make them stronger adults.
So what are the stages? Like, what stages will kids go through in a divorce? And also, do they
Well,
all go through them, or what does that look like?
no, I mean, every child is different, every divorce is different, every parent is different, but typically, because divorce it's a loss, it's a grief that they have to process. So you're gonna kind of refer back to the stages of grief that you would go through if you were losing a loved one, losing a relationship in general, because think about it in those terms. They are losing the relationship with their parents as they knew it. Things change. Mom goes back to work. She's not there to be as involved in their day-to-day activities. So you're going to have the 5 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. I saw every stage, and I'm fortunate that I found acceptance. But denial, this can't be happening. I don't believe it. It's not going to happen. You'll get back together. Bargaining, what can I do? Why, can't you guys figure it out? What did I do wrong? What could I do differently? Anger, anger's a big one. Why is this happening? Um, this isn't how it's supposed to be. This is not what I want my life to look like. Depression, obviously, it's very, very sad time. And then acceptance. And these stages of grief are not stages that they process through one after the other. They're going to cycle in and out of all of these stages at various times. They can be in 2 stages at once: anger and depression, denial and bargaining. So this is not a checklist process. Acceptance may come, and then they may fall back out of it. They may realize, no, this really does suck, and I'm not going to accept it.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, I know it was hard for my kids. I know my son really blamed himself a lot. We read all those, it's not your fault, Cocoa Bear, those
Uh-huh.
books. And I was actually talking to Jaden the other day about that, because I do want her to be on. I'd love to get some kids of divorce on and see what they think. See if they're, so maybe I'll hit your kids up, but and see kind of what they think about that. But Jaden was like, I knew it wasn't my fault. So she was she was fine. But Cody did, he was one of those ones that kind of, took it on himself. And I'm sure you hear this a lot, people wondering, would it be better to stay married and just be miserable? I mean, one of the reasons, I got divorced, I want my kids to know what love is. And I want them to see what a good, healthy, happy relationship looks like. And I want to model that. On the other hand, by getting the divorce, they were put through a lot of really not great stuff. Stuff that's not my choice to share, but it really, there were some hard times for them. And I kind of wonder, would it have been better to stay married and miserable than to divorce? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think every marriage is different. The answer is, it depends.
You sound like a lawyer.
Yeah, generally speaking, I'd say it's better to get divorced than to stay in an unhealthy, unhappy, and especially a toxic relationship. So let me speak to the toxic relationship aspect. If you're in a relationship that's emotionally, physically, verbally abusive, it is always best to leave. When children see that, they are experiencing trauma. You have your big T's and your little T's. Your big T's are, the ones that you would expect: assault, abuse, combat. Your little T's are the small fissures that happen all the time. When they see mom and dad screaming at each other, they're learning, first of all, as you said, modeling. They're learning that's the way to communicate. They're learning that the world is unsafe because their home is unsafe. And even if there's no physical abuse, emotional abuse is actually just as damaging or more, because it's much harder to identify and heal it. It starts to create beliefs in them that become the foundation for what they think, what they feel, and how they behave. And those belief systems are very hard to undo later in life because they exist on a very subconscious level. So if their belief, they might think mom and dad love each other, but their belief may be that love is angry. And they may not even realize that until they start acting it out in future relationships when they seek angry relationships. So for toxic relationships, 100% it's better to leave. But even the ones that are not toxic, maybe they are, there's issues in the marriage that just don't seem to be reconcilable. In the long run, that's going to affect health, self-esteem, confidence, not just in the parent, but in the children. So by leaving and creating an environment that can be whole and healthy, you're creating better health for the family, everybody in the family member. Even if one parent doesn't want the divorce, in the long run, they will be happier. The children will be happier. They're not going to be exposed to the negative role modeling of what a relationship looks like. You're going to minimize effects on the children. My marriage wasn't abusive, nor was it toxic. From the outside, it looked wonderful, but it wasn't allowing either of us to grow. And it took me a while to realize this because I had a tremendous amount of guilt too. But it took me a while to realize this, that by divorcing, my children got the best of both of us because they were able to see the side of me that was being shadowed by my partner, my husband. And so they got the best of both of us. And in that, they grew like exponentially. I couldn't believe when they were growing into their adulthood how much of each of us that they got. And I don't think they would have gotten that had we stayed married. So it was a very difficult time, but I think the outcome actually was more beneficial for them in the fact that I left.
No, that's really a good point, and it's really interesting. I'm not, I still kind of question mine periodically, but I mean, you kind of just go, it is what it is. And I am at least thankful that they're getting to witness a really healthy marriage now. Like I'm super happy. It's been now, I think I'm going on 10 years of marriage. And I love it and they love him. And so they are at least seeing that kind of teamwork, which they weren't seeing before. So what do you think the hardest part of divorce is for kids?
I don't know that I can say what the hardest part is because each child is different, but it's their own self-doubt. It's feeling like they have lost their foundation. The guilt is very hard. Not wanting it and feeling powerless to do anything about it. Their routines are completely disrupted. And I'm not talking about if a parent moves out of state or if they have major disruptions to their life, which very often happens, having to switch schools, losing their friends. So their support network is gone as well as the foundation of the family. The hardest part, I think, is the powerlessness to do anything about it and losing the relationship with the parents and having to redefine it. Again, hard is going to depend on the age of the child. My parents were 3 when they divorced and I didn't even know any different.
Right.
My kids were 8 and 11. They certainly knew different. The changes, like I said, I went back to work. So they had to become more independent very quickly because as a stay-at-home mom, they had what they needed at any given point. When I was working, they did not. So I think the guilt and internalizing it create one of the biggest difficulties combined with that powerlessness. But the most difficult thing, I think, depends on each child and the situation that they're in.
Yeah, and probably it depends on the situations. I mean, I've dealt with high conflict divorces now for over 23 years, 22, 23 years. And the high conflict ones are typically the ones where the kids end up with huge problems, right? The kids are suicidal. They just can't take it. We hear, they're in counseling and you hope and you pray that works, but it doesn't necessarily always work. But these kids can be damaged by the high conflict of families and
extremely damaged.
What could parents do, during divorce to lessen those problems?
I think the number one thing parents can do is keep all negative feedback, information, comments, opinions about the other parent completely out of those children's world. Talking negatively about your spouse, fighting in front of your children, making derogatory comments, putting the children in the middle and forcing them to choose a parent, even if that's not what you're directly doing, you are forcing them to take sides when you badmouth the other parent. That is the number one most damaging thing that you can do to a child during divorce, is to force them to choose sides directly or inadvertently. Don't ask questions of your children about the spouse. Don't, if you're going to co-parent, do it collaboratively. And if you can't agree on it, disagree separate from your children. Don't hear them argue. Don't let them hear you arguing about the rules of each household, because then they're going to learn that the different rules in each household kind of pit the parents against each other as well.
Yeah, I
And
remember
it
this is
creates conflict.
one thing that I talked to my clients about, and one thing that I think that I did decently in my divorce was I complimented my ex to my kids. You know, if they, you know, my daughter looks quite a bit like her dad, and she's beautiful. You know, so I will compliment her on features that she got from him, or I will, you know, when they had math homework, I'm great at math, but not geometry. So
Mhm.
that's not even real math. But I, you know, I used to say, oh, your dad can help you with that. He's so great at this. And I think that that's helpful. I think that they always felt comfortable with me talking about their dad. They never felt like I was going to put them down, or they rarely, I'm sure I wasn't perfect. I think they rarely felt like I would put him down, but I did build him up pretty frequently with them, or at least I tried to, and not put him down.
Mhm.
And I think that's important. I think, you know, when you put the other parent down, you can just, I've seen it. You can watch just the energy be sucked out of a kid's face. You know, they're half that other parent. And so you're saying
You're
half of them,
putting them down.
right? Half of them is bad now. Um, so, you know, it's important, I think, to talk to kids about the divorce process. Do you have any suggestions on how to talk to kids about divorce? Maybe even when to do it?
Absolutely. When depends on the child. Some children are not ready to talk about it.
Right.
Uh, at the end of the day, allowing the child the space to talk, express their emotions. They're going to have big emotions. One of those emotions is going to be anger, and that anger could be directed at one or both parents. Allowing the child to feel the anger, express the anger, um, talking to them honestly and openly, but at an age appropriate level. Uh, Kids don't need to know some of the harsh realities of what happened in the marriage. They do not need to be given this information. Again, it might not be age appropriate, but it can also further that divide between parents and create animosity towards one parent. That is, whether it's a reality or not, the parent is, they're always going to be their parent, and they need to be able to love that parent unconditionally as well. So in creating negative narratives, you're creating opinions about that parent that are damaging to the child.
And
So
that's a
spend,
really great point. It's a really great point of letting your child love the other parent, and really
yes,
loving your child more than you hate or dislike your ex, because you know, it's
right.
hard. I'm sure you knew, I'm sure you felt there were times where it was hard and you were annoyed and you were frustrated. But you
Mm-hmm.
suck it up for your kids, right? I mean, you you don't get them in the middle of it, but you also don't put down the other parent. I mean, we can all, you know, say the thousands of things that our ex did wrong. I'm sure my ex has as many thousands of things that I did wrong as I have that he did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I disagree with him, you know, because it's his reality, and it is what it is. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned is let your kid love the other parent. Let your,
Right.
you know, and accept that and be okay with that, you know. Um,
And don't get involved in the other parents' parenting time.
right, right. And that's really important too, is enjoy the time you've
Mm-hmm.
got with your kids, and don't interfere with the other parent. I mean, just enjoy it. And it's hard. Look, it's hard. Some people get divorced, and they're still very much upset. You know, the loss of control of the relationship is terrible, can be terrible,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, when you've controlled something for so long and now you can't, You know, when you used to be able to tell your person not to do that with the kids, and now they're doing that with the kids, you
Right.
know, you get nothing. And so your kid comes back and says, oh, I did this with dad, or I did that with mom. And, you know, you're ready to blow a gasket because that was something that wasn't done, you know, when you lived together.
Right. You co-parented.
Right.
It's much harder to co-parent when you're not together,
Right.
because if you had a difficult time co-parenting when you were together, imagine what it's going to be like when you have no investment in the relationship. So that brings me to something that I think is really critical, and we'll probably touch on it later, is get your own support. Get your own support, get a therapist, get a support network, get people who can help you to process that anger, that guilt, the remorse, any of those unpleasant emotions. You need to do your own work and process that yourself. Um, I I tell parents, if you can't say something nice, just don't say anything. Yes,
Right.
you're going to be angry with that other parent. Even under the best circumstances, there is going to be discord. Just, it's inevitable. Don't say anything to your kids about your spouse. Just keep it to yourself. Then get your own support. They're not your support system. That's another one, is don't use your children as emotional supports.
You know,
That's enough.
that's huge. There's Kelly Clarkson did a song about that, about her mom leaning on her and she was just too young. And it's really a great song. And it clearly affected her for the rest of her life because, you know, she wrote a pretty angry song about it.
Mhm. That creates attachment disorders, anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment. All of these will directly impact their relationships in the future, because if they are leaned on too hard by a parent, they develop codependent patterns. They see themselves as the support for something that they shouldn't be supporting, and yet they feel guilt and frustration by that. But then they don't know any other way to relate. So they gravitate towards people who are highly needy. And when they feel overwhelmed and want to run, then they feel guilty. It's just this cycle.
Well, and
So
that may be,
attachment disorders
if
form.
I can get you to come back one day, maybe that'll be something that we talk about, is how to get through the divorce, you know, as now a single person going out in the world, and how to sort of get rid of your baggage and deal with it.
Navigating dating after that,
Oh, yeah.
which I can't stress enough. It's not in the children's best interest to bring dating prospects, even if you have something that is developing into a strong relationship, that needs to be separate from the children. Keep your personal life separate from the children. They may have questions, you know, where do you go? What do you do? Again, answer honestly, but age appropriately. But bringing partners into the children's lives too soon is extremely detrimental for the children.
Yeah, it
They
can create a
don't
lot of
need
loss.
a lot of loss, and do so slowly. Don't force a new partner on the child. That's always huge. So I think that touches on what you're saying as to, you know, the baggage in life after divorce. So we can talk about that at another time, but it's still very relative here, because I have seen and heard of parents bringing partners into the home within a month after the I won't even call it the divorce. The divorce might not even be final, but during the process of the divorce, before it even is final, they're bringing a partner into the home, maybe moving them in. Um, Chances are this relationship may not last, and you can't bring a revolving door of new partners into their lives, because that teaches them that relationships are not stable.
Right. And that's a big one. I see it very frequently, very,
I'm
very
sure.
frequently in my divorce world, where people are, you know, they're dating immediately after, or maybe they, you know, had an affair with someone and they're now in a serious
Hmm.
relationship with that person. And so that causes, it doesn't even just cause problem with the kids, though. It causes problems in the ability to co-parent, which, you know, again, then affects the
Yes.
parents.
Yes. Creates a lot of animosity between the parents too,
Right.
which at the core of divorce, animosity between the parents is That's the one thing I could stress is if you can minimize the animosity between the parents, and if not, at least keep it out of your children's world. Amicable divorces create a better environment for the children to thrive and grow.
Well, thank you
I
so
can't
much.
stress that.
Thank you
Of
so much for
course,
that information.
course.
I so appreciate you being
pleasure.
here, and I'll definitely want you to come on again. So, is there any just maybe one tip you could give somebody, like your best number one tip to give to parents? Maybe a high conflict, parents in a high conflict situation. What is one bit of advice that you can give them?
Keep your mouth shut.
All right, keep your mouth shut. That's perfect. I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Don't share everything that's in your head. So that would be it.
thank you so much, Karen. I appreciate you being here.
Of course. Thank you. I look forward to the next time I see you.
Me too.